Welcome to the Be the Ultimate Assistant podcast with Bonnie and Vicki. I'm Vicki Sokol-Evans.
And I'm Bonnie Low-Kramen. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, Bonnie.
How are you doing, Vicki?
I'm doing great. How about you?
So excited for today.
I know today's like Christmas for us because we're huge fans. We're huge fans of the TED Talks, and there's one in particular that we absolutely love.
And we reference it all the time.
All the time.
I was remembering how I think it had to be like 4 years ago, and you and I were talking about our workshop and why we were doing what we were doing. And that's when your eyes got real big and you said, "Oh, Bonnie, you have to watch this TED Talk by Simon Sinek. And it's about your why, and you know, it'll just help us so much. It's going to help you, and don't even question it. Just go home and watch it," which I did. And it was amazing. And of course, as of today, the man has been watched on TED more than 23 million times, and we certainly understand why. And then a few weeks ago, we even watched it on my birthday, remember?
Yeah, so we were out to dinner together with a group of people, and we mentioned our why and because they were asking, like, what have y'all been up to? It's like, well, we're following our why. And they're like, what are you talking about? And so we brought it up at dinner. It was Friday night. And I will admit there was a bottle of wine shared among us, and then we went back to your place, and I don't know if I'm embarrassed or proud to say that we put it on the TV, and on a Friday night in New Jersey, we watched Simon's TED Talk.
Again, like for the 12th time, whatever.
Yeah. I can't get enough of it. So anyway, we've got a great show today, 2 episodes. Bonnie, you're going to kind of set us up, but we're always searching for examples of successful partnerships between the assistant and the manager. And I think we found the perfect success story, and especially with our one of our biggest heroes, Simon Sinek. And so Bonnie, do you want to set the stage for us as what we're doing for this next 2 episodes?
Yeah, happy to. And then we're going to jump right in. We were lucky enough to meet Monique Helstrom, Simon Sinek's assistant, fabulous assistant, at the Behind Every Leader conference. And Vicki brought her up to me and introduced me. And we were like, oh, my goodness. Yeah, we both had the same thought that we had to have them on the podcast. So we are doing 2 episodes back to back, parts 1 and part 2. In part 1, Simon Sinek will be talking about leadership and how everyone can be a leader, but not only executives, but assistants as well. And then in part 2, we bring Monique into the mix, and we get to see their relationship and hear about how it all works and what their secret is, because they have an amazing relationship. So that's what we're going to do, and guaranteed you're going to take so much from these 2 episodes. It's so exciting.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Simon, and we'll get started. So Simon Sinek is best known for popularizing the concept of why, and for the talk he gave on the subject that became the 3rd most watched TED Talk of all time. Described as a visionary thinker with a rare intellect, Simon teaches leaders and organizations how to inspire people. With a bold goal to help build a world in which the vast majority of people go home every day feeling fulfilled by their work, Simon is leading a movement to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. And he certainly inspires us.
Well, we are so excited to welcome Simon Sinek and Monique Helstrom to the podcast. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Oh, great. Vicki and I are so pleased to have you here. You know, let me begin by saying that I was taken with starting with the homepage of the Start With Why website. These 3 sentences scroll. Imagine a world where people wake up inspired to go to work. Imagine a world where we feel safe at work. Imagine a world in which trust and loyalty are the rules and not the exception. Well, Simon, it seems clear that by putting that right on your homepage that you see that the world is not this way right now. You're traveling the world speaking. What are you seeing as the issues in the workplace that need to change specifically for leaders and their immediate support team?
So I like to joke that I'm embarrassed that I have a career. You know, I talk about things like trust and cooperation, and there should be no demand for my work.
Yeah.
But the fact is there is demand, which means one of two things. It means, one, it means these things are desperately lacking. But the good news is there's an opportunity because people are looking for solutions. And so what I'm starting to learn as I travel around and meet leaders and interact with different organizations, regardless of their size and regardless of their industry, is there's the general understanding and the general belief, especially from the early adopters, that the tools that were developed to run a business in the 80s and 90s are just insufficient for these modern day and for this modern day and age.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the systems that we use today were developed in boom time years, popularized by Stack and Yank, you know, where we rank them and we promote the top performers and we fire the bottom performers. You know, this is a strange thing. It's so normal in our modern day and age. Or using layoffs to balance the books, right? Think about that. You're going to send someone home and tell them that they no longer can provide for their families because the company missed their numbers this year. This was a system that did not exist prior to the 1980s. Shareholder supremacy did not exist prior to the late 1970s. So a lot of the things that we see as normal doesn't mean they're healthy. It's like being a functioning alcoholic. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy. And so what I'm starting to see is people are understanding that a return to the acknowledgement that people are at the central core of the business and not numbers and not even product, but the human beings who show up at the company every single day
Right.
are what make a company thrive. Companies are struggling with things like innovation and engagement. And it's amazing to me some of the blindness that they're trying to, they don't recognize that the reason the engagement numbers are down is because nobody feels that their companies or their leaders care about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're out there banging the drum, trying to offer a new perspective, to offer some tools on how to return to this time where people were central to the organization. And the joke is, it's actually better for business. It's actually better for innovation. It's actually better for profitability. It actually makes for a better business, not surprisingly, because the people are totally devoted.
Oh, thank goodness.
Well, we're working at it. We're working at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But there is good momentum, and there's some great champions out there helping us prove the case.
Right. Well, we echo those messages as well in our training with assistants. It's awesome. Thank you so much for that.
So Simon, you obviously work with companies trying to address this topic. What about individuals? If individuals want to do something to help their organization, is there anything we can do? I know you have one of the top 20 TED Talks on finding their why. Is that the solution? Can you give us something that we can do individually?
Sure. I mean, when you say I work with organizations, I only work with individuals. I mean, organizations are nothing more than collections of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always smile when people say, you know, today this company announced nothing. Somebody in the PR department wrote a press release, showed it to somebody. Somebody said, change this. They rewrote it and gave it back, and somebody said, oh, that's okay. So, you know, send that out, you know. There are human beings that make decisions and are responsible for the running and communication of companies. And so we only work with individuals. Of course, we have to, right? And there are many tools that these individuals need, some of which we can offer and some of which we cannot. Learning your why is definitely one tool. Understanding why you do what you do gives your own work, your own sort of, it gives it purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning that inspires you to contribute to something bigger than yourself. It makes the work that you do feel, it makes you feel valued and valuable. So learning your why absolutely is an essential component. But there's all kinds of ongoing training that is also really, really important. In our space, which is predominantly leadership and culture, what people fail to recognize is that leadership is a practice. It's a skill that you learn. It's a skill that you practice. It's not an event. It's not a 3-day offsite, 2 days of golf, you know, and then you listen to a bunch of speakers and read a couple of books and now you're a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming a leader doesn't mean you got the promotion. You know, getting a promotion means you were put in a leadership position. It doesn't make you a leader. I know many people who sit at the highest levels of organizations who are not leaders. They have authority, and we do as they tell us because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And yet I know many people at the lower levels of organizations who have no authority, and yet they've made a decision. the decision to look after the person to the left of them, and the decision to look after the person to the right of them, and we would follow them anywhere. They are the leaders. And so when we go into an organization, we want to develop curriculum so they're teaching leadership to people of all levels inside the company, that the people in leadership positions themselves are embracing their responsibility as leaders and going through that transition where they understand that when you're junior, you're responsible for the results. When you're senior, you become responsible for the people who are responsible for the results. There's no CEO on the planet who's responsible for the customer. You don't even talk to the customer. You're responsible for the people who are responsible for the customer. There's no CEO on the planet who's responsible for product development or market share or any of these things. Management's responsibility is to take care of the people who take care of the work. And when they learn that and practice that, the organization hums. So that's what we're out there teaching and spreading.
Oh my gosh, I love that perspective. So can we go, is there someplace on the website, what kind of courses can we take from you
Sure.
individually, whether I'm the CEO or the assistant or middle manager, where can I go to get this training?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few resources. If you go to our website, which is startwithwhy.com, W-H-Y, we have free resources, some quick, fun ways to learn how to find your why. One of them is called the Friends Exercise. But there's also a why discovery course, which I used to, and still do from time to time, sit down with people and actually help them find their why. And my amazing team said to me, Simon, if you and a few people you train are the only people doing it, how will everyone learn their why? So they took it upon themselves to take everything that I did to help people find their why, and they made it an online course. So it's literally everything that I did so that more and more people can have access to it. So that's available at startwithwhy.com. I'm really, really proud of what they've built.
Yeah,
really
I checked it out. I love it. I totally love it.
It's really great.
It's great. So let me ask you this, that in the training we do with executive and personal assistants around the world, Vicki and me, we see that workplace bullying is epidemic. We see a lot of fear in the workplace, a lot of suffering in silence, a lot of leading by intimidation. And I'm referring to hostile work environments, and it sounds like you know what I'm talking about, from public humiliation to yelling to using profanity.
Sure.
So what are you seeing this also, and what can we do about it? Because certainly this seems antithetical to what it is you're trying to build here. What do you think of it?
So I think the two challenges are very different, and we have to separate them. You know, that executive assistant versus that personal assistant. An executive assistant is probably going to be working in an organization in which there are other people, and that toxic environment means that there's no feedback. In other words, what are the reviews being given? What's the 360 review? Like, in other words, there are systems inside companies that can manage for toxic leadership. In other words, everybody knows who the toxic leaders are, but people don't choose to do anything about it. There's a choice being made, especially when that person is not the most senior person. Everybody knows that they're bad, but usually we leave them alone because their numbers are good. And this is a very good short-term strategy, because ultimately it will backfire and much greater damage will happen. And it really takes great courage and great leadership to ask a person to leave whose numbers are good, who is a toxic leader. And it sends a communication to the rest of the organization that no matter how good your numbers, if you don't live by a certain code of ethics and values, you have no place here. Unfortunately, the opposite is more common, where we leave people because their numbers are good, which also sends a communication to the rest of the company that says, we don't care if you lie, cheat, and steal. As long as you make your numbers, you're safe. You know? So the good news is that there are systems that you can control for that. And good leadership is the one. When it's above that person, being willing to have the courage to remove that person because it's the right thing to do for the long term. And if you serve that person, to work together to protect each other, which actually emasculates that toxic leader. There's been some work written about this. There was an article a couple years ago in Harvard Business Review, how to emasculate a toxic leader, and it's basically the people coming together.
Right.
The other example, the personal assistant, I think is more difficult because there's no system. It's usually one person who hires one person, and there's no feedback loops, and there's no consequences, and quite frankly, that personal assistant is totally within the control of that other person, hiring and firing and craziness, you know? And this is where I think organizations like yours are very, very important. Because when someone is working for a toxic leader, what it'll do is destroy their self-confidence. And as their self-confidence goes down, they will stay there because they will think that it's them, or they won't have the confidence to leave, or they won't have the confidence to stand up to that person. And so I think organizations like yours that simply talk about that these cultures exist and helping people rebuild their confidence so they can either stand up for themselves or, quite frankly, quit, right, are really, really important. I think confidence is the core of all of this, because anybody who has self-worth would never put up with being treated like that.
Right.
And we don't see it. It's kind of like eating a Big Mac every day. It's like if you eat one Big Mac, no big deal. You feel a little sluggish, but you're fine. But if you eat one every day, you're going to get diabetes and die. And so the thing is that people in those situations, they think they can put up with it because they're strong, and they don't realize that dealing with it day after day after day and putting up with it actually is very destructive. The analogy I'll give you is when mountain climbers climb Mount Everest, they stop at different base camps to adjust to the altitude. And they wait for a week because of the altitude and the lower oxygen content in the air. And once they've adjusted, they then climb to the next base camp. And then they wait there for a week. And once they've adjusted, they climb to the next base camp, right? And this is one of the problems with the human body. The human body can adjust to very, very austere conditions. But that it doesn't mean it's good for them. In other words, the body is still eating itself and the cells are still being destroyed. And this is the problem, which is we think we're actually adapted, but we're not.
Right.
And so we actually are destroying ourselves if we don't get out of there.
I couldn't agree with you more. Simon, are leaders receptive to this information?
Like anything, there's a bell curve. Your early adopters are going to be very receptive to it. The best ones are the ones who are already doing it, but they're looking to hone their skills. The next level are people who know that they could be better. In fact, sometimes they may think they're bad, and they want to be better. That's the next level. There's the next level, which are people who, sure, if it was made easy and available to them, they would totally do it, and theoretically they would like to be better leaders. And at the end of the spectrum are people who are completely closed-minded and basically not open to anything and think they know all the answers. I hear this from people all the time. I think, look how much money I've made, Simon. I think I know what I'm doing, right? But the irony is those people actually live very unhealthy lives themselves. They often suffer all kinds of medical issues themselves because the human body is not made for that kind of stress. And so though they may be in charge and though they may have made a lot of money and though they may have accumulated a lot of power, at what cost?
Yes.
To themselves, to their families, to their relationships with their spouses, their children, their friends, et cetera, right? And so even if they're selfishly motivated, good leadership is actually better for our health. I can actually make a biological argument based on the existence of cortisol, which is the chemical responsible for the feeling of stress inside our bodies, that the more stress that we produce for ourselves, acting in this way, being a bad leader, it actually damages our health. Where a good leader will actually be healthier. So even if you don't care about anybody else, if you want to just live longer and not take pills and die of cancer as easily, may I prescribe good leadership?
Yes, indeed. And we prescribe assistants in the world to be good leaders as well.
Absolutely.
And in turn, they too will be healthier and happier. It's a win-win situation. And so that's why it's so maddening to see that it's, I use the word epidemic and I don't use it lightly because that is literally what Vicki and I are seeing all over the world. And
I just thought of another strategy to deal with a toxic leader.
Please.
Which is a sense of humor and empathy. In other words, when somebody yells at us, we take it personally. I'm stupid, I'm dumb, they told me I'm stupid, right? We start to believe it. But if we're being yelled at by somebody who's toxic, to literally go through our mind some empathy, like, oh my God, how much pain is this person in that this is the person they've become? Like, what is going on outside of their work life that this is how they're acting at work? Oh my God, like, oh, that poor person. Anyway, I'm going to listen to what he's saying, but oh my God, that poor person,
Right, imagine being them every day.
If we can disconnect what they're saying at us and see that as symptomatic of what they're dealing with, maybe even have the opportunity to say, hey, you are really mean to me. Are you okay? Like, I have to believe that that's not how you choose to be, so I'm actually worried about you. Like, are you okay? I'm worried about you as a human being, even though you berated me yesterday, you know? So I think empathy and a bit of a sense of humor really, really helps. You know, to be able to joke about how just surreal and insane your work situation is a great coping mechanism.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Much healthier, much healthier. And it doesn't mean you have to quit.
Right, and it's practical. There's a tactic that you have as part of your tool chest. That's great.
And going back to self-confidence, you know, I have a friend who has a personal assistant, and he's pretty hard on her. I have to admit, you know. And he goes through assistance, unfortunately, like most people go through underwear. And the one that he has now is fantastic because she stands up to him. And he actually respects her. And because she stands up to him, he treats her very well because he respects her. And it's the ones who allow him to walk all over them that he does it more and more and more and more. Give him an inch, he'll take a mile.
You got it.
You know? So
and
once again it goes back to confidence.
So, but Simon, what about the other end of the spectrum if the executive assistant to the CEO is the one that's being the bully to colleagues because of her position in the company, humiliating IT staff or other coworkers, and what advice do you have about that type of scenario?
Yeah. So if the person they work for is aware of it, then the person who they work for has to take responsibility. Just like a parent is responsible for their child, if that assistant is berating other employees, that is reflecting badly on their boss. You know, because what that says is that the boss tolerates that. And so if the boss is concerned about their own reputation, they have to deal with it in a constructive and productive and empathetic manner. Are you okay? I'm worried about you, right? If they are unaware of it, right, then I would ask that person to ask themselves some hard questions. There will always be a victim mentality, right? They will never see themselves in the situation. I don't want to yell at the IT department, but I can't help it if they're stupid. You know, I don't like having to yell at the other assistants, but if they would just do their job, then I wouldn't have to, right? In other words, the one common factor in all of these difficult relationships that this person has is them. And they sort of have to have a come to Jesus moment and realize that the stress that they put others through is maybe not because of others, it may be because of them, you know? And once again, like that toxic leader, it's unhealthy. It doesn't feel good. Nobody enjoys going to work and dealing with that, you know? Creating a tense situation, and even if they didn't create it, let's just say that somebody else did create the situation. You can pour fuel on the fire or you can pour water on the fire. You can choose to diffuse a situation, or you can choose to inflame a situation. Yeah. Right? So if somebody really is the difficult one, instead of inflaming the situation, even if you're right, to simply say, I understand what you're trying to tell me, but I'm struggling here, so let's try and work together, or simply to say, you're right, I'm sorry. Saying you're sorry doesn't mean you're wrong, right? So I think, once again, it boils down to confidence. The more confident somebody is in who they are and what their ability is, the trappings of their position will be less seductive. You know, like I'm the assistant to the senior guy, you have to deal with me. Well, if you really believe in your own strength, you won't derive your confidence from your position. You'll derive your confidence from who you think you are, right? And so once again, whether they're the assistant or whether they're the executive, if they're confident, they don't need to throw around their weight. Everybody knows their position, and they show up to help people find solutions. That's what they try to do. I'm very sympathetic to Monique's position because I know that I have this nice life and sort of everybody is sort of, I only get to talk to nice people, but I'm fully aware that there's a line of people banging down her door, sending a million emails, and the only reason I get to talk to nice people is because Monique only lets me talk to nice people. Right? So I have this rosy-colored view of what the world is like. I think everybody's amazing and so nice and so polite. Right? But I'm fully aware that people are aggressive and people lie. Yeah. You know, Simon and I are best friends from high school, and Monique will, like, they think we don't talk or something. You know? Right. And Monique will, like, did you go to high school with this person? I'll be like, never heard of them in my life. So like people lie, anything. And so the challenge is when dealing with that, which is overwhelming, and from the sheer volume, how do you maintain your composure and help people find a solution? How does Monique deal with people who are coming at her, who want something from her, who really are just trying to get through her? They don't really care about her day. There's no empathy out there. How does she have empathy for them and help them find a solution for what they want, even if that doesn't mean talking to me? And that's really, really hard. It takes tremendous amount of practice. And I, for one, am unbelievably lucky that Monique is really good at it.
Right.
And we'll get a chance to talk to Monique in the second episode, so I can't wait for that.
Right.
I do have a follow-up question, Simon, because I know that we probably, I mean, I'm confident we have people on both sides of the coin listening to this that
Yep.
that they're experiencing bullying or hostile work environment, or that they're wondering, am I that executive assistant bullying other people, or am I that leader? Is there a litmus test or checklist or questionnaire they could take? How do you know? How do you look in the mirror and say, I'm the one?
I guess the knee-jerk reaction is if you think if everyone annoys you, it's probably you. You know.
Take a note, Vic.
Yes,
you know, if you honestly believe that you're just surrounded by idiots, it's probably you, because statistically that just cannot be true. You know.
And so, Simon, is that a sentence you will actually say to a leader? Will you say to them, if everyone's...
I've never said those words per se, but I have in many circumstances pointed out that they are the only common factor in all of the failed or difficult relationships they have. And I push very hard to leaders that one of the jobs of being a leader is accountability. It's one of the hard things about being a leader.
Right.
Because when you're a leader, if everything goes right, you have to give away all the credit. And if everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility. And that's just one of the crappy things about being a leader. That's just one of the sacrifices that goes along with that position and that responsibility. So yes, I very frequently have the accountability conversation, and sometimes it's pretty blunt. It's quite blunt.
Well, in your work with leaders, with these individuals in these companies, what are, as we wrap up this part one of our time with you, what are the things, the top things that you tell them to do in order to have people be inspired and excited to go to work each day? What do you say to these leaders where it's not necessarily the case right this minute?
Sure. So the most important thing to understand is that leadership is a skill that requires daily practice. It is not an event. Making one big decision, even if it's the right decision, doesn't make you a leader. It just means you made one big right decision, right? Leadership is the daily practice of taking care of the lives of others, sometimes sacrificing your interests to do so. It is a responsibility. It is not a rank. And all the perks that come with leadership, you make more money, you get a bigger office, you get a better parking space, people hold your door open for you, they call you sir or ma'am, they bring you coffee or tea without you even asking for it. These are perks. These are perks of position, right? That all of those perks come at a cost. They are not free. And that cost is you're taking the responsibility for the well-being of other human beings. And so this big thing that a leader, regardless of their rank, whether you're the assistant, whether you're the executive, whether you're the lowest person on the totem pole or the highest person on the totem pole, you can take responsibility for someone to the left or someone to the right. And if in a leadership position, you're now responsible for even more people. And so really showing up to work to understand that your job is a human job really is the source of joy and inspiration. Because nobody wants to work an entire life simply to earn money. I can prove it. How many people do you know who, when they die, request that their name, the dates that they were born and died, and the last number that was in their bank account be put on their tombstone? Right? How many cars I owned? Put that on my tombstone. Of course not. We all want to be remembered by the kind of people we were. We want to be remembered by what we did for others. He gave. She served. She loved. He cared. Devoted mother. Devoted father. Right? This is how we want to be remembered.
Yes.
And so if that's how we want to be remembered, it kind of makes sense that we should live our lives so that we will be remembered that way. And the irony is, the money and all the fun stuff that comes along with it, it will still come. But the purpose of life is to serve, because that's how we all want to be remembered. That's what we want on our tombstones.
And Bonnie, you have a quote from, who is the quote you say, the day we find out?
Oh, one of my favorite quotes, besides my daily inspiration from Simon Sinek that shows up in my email every day, is a quote by Mark Twain, which says, "The two best days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why."
Yep. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, ain't it the
that
truth?
The truth? Yep.
Wow.
And both of them are miraculous opportunities.
Indeed.
So Simon, for all the listeners, what is one tactical, practical thing each one of us could do right now, today? Like, as soon as we end the podcast, like, what do you want us to do?
Right. So remember I said leadership is a practice, and it doesn't have to be big things. It can be small. So here's a list of small things you can do to practice leadership. When you ask someone how they're doing, do you actually care about the answer? Right? And if you don't care about the answer, don't ask the question. Right? Because remember, leadership is actually caring about the well-being of others. It's not small talk. Right? You're standing in an elevator. You're running late for a meeting. The door starts to close, and you see someone run for the elevator. What do? Most of us pretend that we can't reach the button, right? Or you can stop the elevator, let the person make it, and you'll arrive a little later for your meeting. That's the practice of leadership. Mm-hmm. It's putting your interests aside for someone else. That's what that is. You go to the kitchen in the office, you pour yourself the last cup of coffee, you put the empty pot back, no big deal. The next person who wants the next cup will make another pot of coffee. Or you spend an extra few minutes to make another pot of coffee, even though no one will be there to see you do it. That is the practice of leadership. And like exercise, it may be painful to start. The stress might go up temporarily, and you may not see any results from all your hard effort, just like exercise. But you stick with it because you know it's the right thing to do, and what starts to happen is the pain goes away, it starts to get easier, the muscle starts to develop, and you actually can lift heavier weights, and your ability to make bigger and bigger decisions that consider the well-being of others actually get easier and easier and easier. Great leaders did not start that way. They've been practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing. And so look for all the little things, tiny, tiny, tiny little things, that the next time somebody does a good job, instead of sending them an email that says good job, pick up their phone if they're not nearby, or walk over to their office if they are nearby and say, just wanted to tell you good job. Like that, those little human connections. When you're talking to someone, putting your phone away or not having it on the table of a meeting. Mm-hmm. Like putting your phone on a table in a meeting communicates to the people in the meeting, you're not the most important thing to me right now. Right. So not even bringing your phone to a meeting is part of good leadership. These are tiny, tiny little innocuous things that add up, just like exercise. Just like exercise. And so you have to work the leadership muscle, and it requires daily practice.
That's brilliant. It's doable. We can all do that. It's
very easy
simple.
Stuff.
Sign me up. It's awesome. And you know, the advice applies to leaders and assistants and staff. Like it applies to everyone, right?
By the way, when I say leader, I don't think leaders are necessarily the executive. Mm-hmm. To me, a leader is anyone who chooses to take care of another person.
Right.
That's what a leader is. So this applies to people in leadership positions as well as those in support positions. But everybody has the opportunity to be a leader.
Yes. Thank you so much, Simon.
Yeah, that's one of Bonnie's topics, is how assistants are leaders. That couldn't be more true. Wow, perfect. Love it. I've got goosebumps.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful part one of our time with you, Simon, and we are very grateful. Do you have one closing thought or one quote that comes to your mind right now that you'd like to finish out this part one of our time with you?
Well, I have my favorite quote. It's a quote by Henry Ford that simply says, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Bye.
Bye. Tune for part 2 in the series when we will be meeting Simon's assistant, Monique Helstrom. Don't miss it.
Thank you once again to our guest, Simon Sinek, and to you for listening. We'll see you again next time. Bye, Bonnie.
Bye, Vicki. Bye, everyone.